Nigeria confirms 409 new cases of COVID-19, with Lagos recording over half of the latest figures.
Federal Executive Council restates commitment to dealing with perpetrators of rape and gender-based violence.
House of Representatives passes amended 2020 budget.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss 5 years of the Buhari administration with a focus on the oil and gas industry.
Since 2015, reforms in the oil and gas have been central to the campaign of the Buhari administration.
Yes, Kirian, and these reforms have started yielding results, particularly when you take a look, for instance, at the midstream sector, where the Nigerian National Corporation, NNPC's plan to commence the construction of a 614-kilometer natural gas pipeline is already in the works.
Yes, and this pipeline is to pass through Kogi, Niger, FCT, Kaduna, and Kano, feeding power plants and industries along the corridor.
All right, so far 15% counterpart funding of the nearly $3 billion project has been paid by the NNPC, while a sovereign guarantee from the China Export and Credit Insurance Corporation has been approved by the Federal Executive Council to cover the rest of the funding.
And deliberate efforts have also been made to establish a good commercial gas exploration framework. For instance, the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas (NLNG) signed an engineering, procurement, and construction contract worth $3 billion for major gas expansion plan expected to boost Nigeria's gas output by more than 30%. NNPC owns a 49% stake in NLNG on behalf of the federal government.
Now, another major reform in the industry is the cancellation of the controversial offshore processing arrangement and a subsequent replacement by a direct sales and purchase scheme with reputable offshore refineries.
And increased revenues are expected from the passage of the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contracts Amendment Act 2019. A significant discount of $1.7 billion has been realized through negotiation of billions of dollars in arrears of cash calls inherited when this administration assumed office.
Now, recall also, Kirian, that the NNPC commenced payment of those arrears since 2017 to the oil companies, and about $2 billion of the arrears had been cleared by the first quarter, but rather by the fourth quarter of 2018.
And for many years, the fuel subsidy regime attracted all shades of opinion about its removal and replacement with a market-led price modulation mechanism has changed the narratives. We have also seen various price reductions in petroleum products by the Petroleum Pricing Products Regulatory Agency, PPPRA.
That's right. And the once deplorable sight of long fuel queues at filling stations across the country has become a thing of the past. The modular refinery initiative of the Buhari administration has also yielded private sector-led projects in Rivers, Imo Delta, and other states.
Though the industry has had its share of challenges, audit reports from agencies such as the Extractive Industries and Transparency Initiative, NAITI, have served as some kind of guide to reposition the industry. Many other steps by government have aided better performance in this sector. Some of these include the recent dissolution of the NNPC board, as well as attempts at perfecting oil blocks licensing open bid exercises.
Now, industry watchers had over time drawn attention to delayed payments for domestic crude oil allocation, as well as the challenge of metering infrastructure for measuring the quantity of crude oil outflows from wellheads to export terminals.
And there are also concerns about the state of the Petroleum Industry Bill, the NATI Act 2007, which allows access to data on oil company payments, costs and earnings. Concerns have also been raised over the eligibility criteria for licensing oil marketing and trading companies.
Well, those are a number of the issues in the oil and gas sector that, of course, we shall be taking a look at today in our focus on that segment of the Buhari administration in 5 years. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kirian Umaya. It's a pleasure to also welcome you to this particular edition of Good Morning Nigeria, broadcast live on the network service of the NTA. And in the course of the program today, other segments will make the entire package. For now, let's join Abdulmalik Adiu for the morning news.
Good morning, Kingsley, and good morning, Kirian. It's good to have you join us on the morning news. Now, 409 new cases of COVID-19 were recorded in Nigeria on Wednesday, the 10th of June 2020. The latest figure from the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, indicates that Lagos recorded 201 of the cases. The Federal Capital Territory had 85, Delta had 22, while Edo recorded 16 new cases. Nasarawa, Borno, and Kaduna had 14 cases each. Bauchi had 10, while Rivers State had 9. The new figures released at about 11 p.m. Wednesday also indicate that Kano and Enugu had 5 new cases. Ogun and Ondo had 4, while Bayelsa, Kebbi, and Plateau had 2 new cases. So far, 382 deaths have been recorded in the country, with 4,351 discharged patients. Nigeria currently has 13,873 confirmed cases of the virus. Now, the Federal Executive Council has described as worrisome and intolerable the alarming cases of rape and gender-based violence in the country and vowed to effectively utilize existing laws of the land towards dealing with perpetrators, as well as putting a stop to the dreaded scourge. Women Affairs Minister Pauline Talon stated this while briefing journalists after the virtual meeting of the Executive Council presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari.
Of cases that are within our courts that have not been addressed. And out of each one case that is reported, be sure there are 10 that has not been reported. Embarrassment is an understatement, and it doesn't give Nigeria a good image. If you rape a child, particularly a child, you've destroyed that child for life, and that is not acceptable. Government will take decisive actions at the highest level to protect women and children within this country.
And the cases of rape are becoming more frequent in Nigeria, and is not the only concern of social crusaders, but more problematic is that most of these cases go unreported for fear of labeling. To address this, the Senate is considering a bill that seeks to criminalize any form of stigmatization against victims of rape and insurgency. The bill has passed second reading.
Every person, community and institution shall protect and uphold the right to dignity and freedom of association of victims of rape and insurgency.
That we must look for a way of ensuring that these young girls or women do not feel stigmatized at all.
What has happened in many countries is that they profile those who have committed rape, so that if you are looking for a house, people look at your name and they've committed rape before, you find it extremely difficult to get a house in that neighborhood.
And to provide for the prosecution and punishment of any persons or group of persons who stigmatize such victims with the view to uphold and protect their fundamental right to dignity and free association as provided by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
House of Representatives has passed the amended 2020 appropriation bill of 10.801 trillion naira. The approved amount is 300 billion naira more than the revised figure of 10.5 trillion submitted by the executive arm of government. The House also approved the $5.5 billion presidential loan request to fund the budget execute priority project and support project by state government. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has commended the leadership and members of the 9th National Assembly on their first anniversary and extolled their sense of duty and diligence in handling issues relating to development of the country. President Muhammadu Buhari, who commended the vision, courage and patriotism of the Assembly in a statement, noted the zeal at which members process bills that directly impact the welfare of Nigerians and how they courageously find common grounds to move the country forward. President Muhammadu Buhari also particularly expressed appreciation to the Senate President Ahmed Lawal and Speaker of the House of Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila for using their wealth of experience, wisdom and knowledge to ensure a peaceful working relationship among lawmakers within both chambers, the judiciary and the executive, by always focusing on the larger picture of nation building. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari said he is deeply shocked by the brutal killing of dozens of people by Boko Haram and Islam in West African province in Gobi Village, Borno State. A statement from Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, indicates that the President was expecting a detailed briefing by the Governor, Professor Babagana Zulum, of the outcome of his visit to the affected communities. Said the primordial nature of the killings is particularly shocking because it happened not long after Ramadan and even when the country is preparing to celebrate the Democracy Day. President Muhammadu Buhari charged the armed forces to sustain their recent string of successes against the terrorists to extract a heavy price from the attackers and bring back all those they kidnapped, as well as a large number of cattle rustled. He also expressed the sincere condolence of the government and people of Nigeria to the bereaved families, communities, and the government and people of Borno State. And that concludes the morning news highlight on Good Morning Nigeria. And Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran after the break.
Main way coronavirus spread is when infected people sneeze and cough. Small droplets of fluid expelled by cough or sneezes are laced with viruses looking for new respiratory tracts to infect. When a sick person sneezes around someone who is healthy, the virus can land in the nose, mouth, or even the eyes, causing an infection. Symptoms can include fever, cough, shortness of breath. Symptoms may appear within 2 to 14 days. Seek medical advice if you develop symptoms and have been in close contact with a person known to have COVID-19, or if you live or have recently been in an area with ongoing spread of COVID-19. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. In this time of despair, our country, Nigeria, needs us now more than ever. We stand a chance to save our great country, Nigeria. A chance to rise up from this pandemic stronger and better. What will be the gain if we do not learn from other countries and observe the lockdown to stop the further spread of the virus? If we loosen our guards and allow this virus doom our very existence, then what have we gained? This is the call to every Nigerian to unite as one and stop the spread of this deadly virus. Stay at home and stay safe. Remember, the virus doesn't move unless we move. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. Nigerians, let us take responsibility. Stay healthy, stay safe, and curb the spread of the virus. Take responsibility. The coronavirus spreads from one person to another. Let us avoid crowd gathering of any kind for any reason. Take responsibility. Avoid traveling from one state to another during these lockdown restrictions. Obey all the rules that are put in place. Take responsibility. Stop spreading fake news and unverified reports about the coronavirus. There is no known cure for COVID-19. Take responsibility. Observe all the measures that can help stop the spread of the virus. Together, We can do this, but only if we take responsibility. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Do you not know that our enemies have no face? They are indigents of no state. They come from no place. And if this boat capsizes, every one of us will go under. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer. Do not say, I am the Iroko when the forest is burning. Do not say, I am the Obeche when the forest is burning. Our differences will not stop us from perishing together. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are broadcasting from Abuja headquarters studios. Now it's time for us to take some business stories, and here is our correspondent, Kolo Muhammad.
The coronavirus pandemic has necessitated governments at all levels to prioritize spending and intervention across board. The action plan includes programs around massive job creation across sectors with huge multiplier effects amongst other benefits.
I would suggest that to kickstart the economy and make it really move forward fast, we should look for an industry sector, one or two sectors that has an integrative, characteristic. Look at things like affordable housing, look at things like agriculture. But I want to zero in quickly on affordable housing because affordable housing has a very strong exit strategy which has to do with mortgages. If we were to give federal government workers, state government workers, local government workers mortgages, for example, to own their own homes, the repayback period is determined by mortgage indicators. And not just that alone, it is possible to begin to build these houses that will integrate labor forces across the board. You're going to have a lot of different kind of professionals, architects and QSs and all manner of professionals, plus of course the artisans, the young people who are carpenters, who are painters, different professions and different arts, and different handiworks will be involved.
The music activities on the floor of the equities market closed negatively, and here is how it played out. I am Kolo Muhammad. Please do stay safe.
And Bayo Tebi is here with us for today's newspaper review. Bayo, you're welcome.
Thank you, Kilo. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley.
Right, Bayo, good to see you.
Good morning, Nigeria.
How was the rain earlier?
Rain, well, very drizzly. And it's off and on along the highway because of, the nature of Abuja.
Yeah, so sometimes the skyline can be so beautiful.
Yes.
Yes, when it's raining. And then you see the mist on the mountain tops, on the hilltops. It was a delight. Okay, we have two papers. One is an editorial, the other one is the window page. Let's take a look at the leadership newspaper. Reps pass revised 2020 budget as Senate considers bill today. Senate confirms Lamido Yuguda as SEC DG. SEC stands for Securities Exchange Commission. That's on page 9. Next story, condemnation trails failure of states to domesticate Child Rights Act. And with the number of riders, domestication will deepen protection of women and children. That's attributed to NAPTIP. Senate moves to protect rape victims against stigmatization. And federal government to take decisive action against rapists. And rights group wants gender units established in police commands. Silva inaugurates NCDMB board. That's the Nigerian Content Development Management Board. And then below the photograph, you have the following headlines. COVID-19, UN agency seeks $182 million for families in Northeast. 4.3 billion naira. Ondo government and EFCC deny quizzing state officials. NIMSI, that's the Identity Management Commission, develops roadmap for digital identification of all Nigerians. And federal government takes delivery of Boeing 737 full flight simulator. That's on page 12. Federal government takes delivery of Boeing 737 full flight simulator. And then two other headlines there. I won't get justice under Oshomole, says Obaseki, as APC screening committee grills governor for 2 hours. That's page 7. Governors oppose infectious disease bill and say powers of federating units under threat. All right. Bayo, let's listen to you.
Let's start with COVID-19. 409 new cases in 16 states, with Lagos taking the lead. However, the concern should be the states that were not used to high numbers that are now turning up with high numbers. They include Delta that turned up with 22. And as of today, the total we have registered in Nigeria is 13,873. We have registered 17 deaths, bringing the total now to 382. But you also recall that last month, it was reported that 57 staff of one company in Ibadan tested positive to COVID-19. On Tuesday, another company, Ogun State, announced 104 out of 108 cases were from one company. This is a company that is at Shagamu, and they were all asymptomatic, and that is the danger. These are persons who are asymptomatic, they have the virus, but it doesn't show, but they have the ability to infect others.
Now we still have a kind of a partial lockdown, so to speak. And I'm thinking that by the time we really open up, Kingsley, I mean, if this trend continues, then it's a little danger up ahead.
Yeah. What is of interest to me is your story. A couple of weeks ago, there were almost daily reports as to the number of persons who were infected in that particular company. Now, what has happened to those who were infected? Were they isolated? Did they undergo treatment? Have they been discharged? How many of them have been discharged? How many of them are still undergoing treatment? Because if you know, there's been a new protocol that was announced sometime last week that persons who are asymptomatic don't necessarily have to be quarantined.
Yes.
So that they can, of course, once they recognize that, then they stay out of the public sphere so as not to infect others, because bed spaces now becoming limited.
Yes.
That's right.
But actually, you're right. You know, the numbers were increasing. First, they were 19, and at the ultimate, it decreased to 57. But the danger is, usually, there's no follow-up from our newspapers. At the last count, it were 57. And ideally, they ought to have shut out the place, decontaminated the place, and the persons who have tested positive will have gone into isolation for treatment. But in the case of the Ogun State, what the commissioner is saying that the incident is not a reflection of the prevalence of the COVID-19. It was only for that factory, not for that whole area. And Ogun State, which plans to open up worship centers.
The factory, the people who work in the factory also interact with the community where the factory is located. Meanwhile, they all have families. Yes. And at the end of the day, they go home every day. They come to work the next day. So, I mean, the transmission is carried by people. It's a movement. When you move with it.
Yes, those family members, they go to marketplaces. They interact with others.
And we're trying to start...
My worry now, it says Ogun State is going to open up for church and mosque this week. And look at it. For now, Ogun State has so far registered about 475. They are and 13 deaths. And they are perhaps the fifth largest in the country when it comes to COVID-19. So there is concern there. also, talking about the number of COVID-19, you recall that the president of Brazil has stopped the daily announcement of COVID-19. The Supreme Court in Brazil says that that is a public right that cannot be stopped, and therefore it must continue. The president had been very lukewarm about COVID-19. He doesn't believe in it. He goes about not wearing face masks, and he's also towing the line of President Donald Trump, emphasizing on the hydrochloroquine for his citizens. But as at last count, Brazil has 775,000 cases and 39,797 deaths. There was even a day that Brazil had 1,440 deaths.
The Brazilian president from the beginning has always been adamant when it comes to issues of coronavirus. He had made the jest of it publicly on several occasions, right? And organizing some gatherings himself. So he established that position from the beginning. So I'm not surprised what he's doing. But again, we pray it doesn't get bad, because if he sees what played out in the U.S. or Italy or elsewhere, you understand the real impact of what we're talking about. Because as a president, I don't believe it is good to come out openly to begin to say that perhaps there is nothing like COVID-19 when people are dying across the globe. It is irresponsible as far as I'm concerned.
The other matter of concern is the issue of rape.
That's right.
A 32-year-old man who allegedly has raped 40 women luckily has been arrested in Kano. This was at a place, Konangora is a village in the outskirts of Kano. He is said to have raped girls, even married women,
the professional,
including an 80-year-old woman. And luckily, at an attempt to rape a woman, he was apprehended. The police in Kano says they are investigating, and he's going to have his day in court. Meanwhile, President Muhammad Buhari has given support to the Minister of Women Affairs, especially on the issues of rape, and therefore they are going to take measures now.
Okay, let's go to the editorial.
Just before we move to the editorial, because this is a very serious issue.
Yeah.
This is a late story on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. We can instigate all the advocacy and make, as it were, with the greatest respect, the noise about incidents of rape, condemn it, and so on and so forth. But what is the legal instrument that is required to deal with perpetrators? That the story is saying that a number of states have not domesticated the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which is very crucial in dealing with instances of gender-based violence. There is also the Child Rights Act, which has also not been domesticated by most states. What are the state governors doing? What are the state legislators in those states also doing? Because it is from that law that you can take, on some of these cases and prosecute them expeditiously.
But I have thought that we discussed on this program that when it comes to the issue of law, that is not an issue there. But what is the issue is the prosecution and the process, not necessarily that there is no law that covers that aspect. I don't know why it has become so difficult. For instance, the child that you mentioned is about only about 20 states or even less.
Yes, the same thing with VAPP. Only 27 states have not domesticated it. And the Minister of Women Affairs emphasized that yesterday, that it will go a long way to helping the cause.
Okay, the tour is on before the reopening of worship centers. So, by coming very briefly,
that the editorial is happening on the danger of reopening worship centers. Simply, it has a tendency to escalate the numbers. Can I give you an example? Just only before last weekend, Saudi Arabia announced opening of mosques, 250 mosques, with the exception of the mosques in Mecca. And let me tell you the figures that follow immediately after Friday. Friday, they had 259 cases. Saturday, 3,126. On Sunday, 3,045. On Monday, 3,369. And Tuesday, 3,288. The picture is that the opening of the worship places is escalating the numbers. And they have a better control system than what we have here.
So, huge lessons to learn from that. Bayo Atoyebe, thank you very much for being around. COVID-19, Deputy Governor of Bauchi State had it. He's recovered from it. Yes. Congratulations to him. Bayo, see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow we are
Democracy Day, God willing. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of NTA. We took a short break now. When we return, 5 years of Buhari administration, what is changing in the oil and gas industry?
Coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, is spreading at an alarming rate all over the globe, including Nigeria. With the number of infected persons in Nigeria increasing daily, Prevention is better than cure. Coronavirus has no cure. The virus spreads from one person, who affects two persons, and by the time the affected person is isolated, the two persons have affected four, and it keeps spreading. You must take preventive measures to save yourself and that of the people around you. Always wash your hands with soap and water. Put distance between yourself and others. Whenever you cough or sneeze, cover your mouth. Clean and disinfect surfaces. Stay at home if you're sick and contact the proper authorities. Together, we can cut down the spread of the coronavirus. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest TV network.
Welcome, dear. Have you washed your hands?
Inside my house again. This thing not the key black man.
I don't know if it's misinformation or poor hygiene that will kill you first. Coronavirus is real, and good hygiene practice will save your life. Anyway, no hand washing, no eating.
I will not take care of it. I was one of the parents.
Coronavirus is real and it's on the rise. But you can help yourself and help others to be safe. Remember, we can stop the spread. It's in your hands.
This message is from the Akinfade Foundation in partnership with the National Orientation Agency with support from MacArthur Foundation.
Coronavirus is real. Steps to avoid this pandemic. Wash your hands regularly or sanitize your hands. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Stay at home unless absolutely necessary. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth if your hands are not clean. Avoid the spread of coronavirus. Coronavirus is real.
There is a lot of fake news and report circulating, especially on social media, on the coronavirus. Do not believe or partake in the spread of these fake reports. If it is not on the official website or news from the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, disregard such report. Only together can we beat this virus. Only together can we overcome this pandemic. Follow the instructions and guidelines provided to combat this virus. Most importantly, stay at home. Self-isolate, regardless of your status. The virus doesn't move unless we move. Let us work together to better Nigeria. Together, we can do this. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Well, thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. And our focus this morning is on oil and gas industry under the Buhari administration. And Abdul Salam Jubain has a background report to set the tone for the conversation.
Nigeria's oil and gas sector remains a critical revenue point for the country, despite the drastic dip in global crude oil prices at the international market. The sector accounts for over 56% of Nigeria's revenue and about 85% of export revenue. In recognition of this, the Muhammadu Buhari administration, upon assuming office in 2015, instituted major reforms in the sector, which many say are yielding positive results. Among these include the Modular Refinery Initiative, which has delivered 3 completed private sector-led projects in Rivers, Imo, and Delta states, and several others are in progress. The once deplorable sight of long fuel queues at filling stations across the country has become a thing of the past under the Buhari administration. The erstwhile controversial Offshore Processing Arrangement, OPA, has since been cancelled by the Buhari administration and replaced with a direct sales and direct purchase DSDP scheme with reputable offshore refineries. In 2019, the following were achieved in the industry: the passage of the long overdue Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Amendment Act 2019, expected to deliver increased revenues to the Federation; signing of the final investment decision FID on the Nigerian LNG Train 7 project, as well as the discovery of crude oil in the north, has set the tone for the development of the industry in 2020 and beyond. However, the volatility of oil prices and dwindling oil revenues remain a major challenge to the sector. Concerted efforts are being made by the Buhari administration to consolidate on gains with various strategies to address challenges in the country's oil and gas sector.
Thank you very much for that backgrounder. We have here with us in the studios now to discuss the issue in further detail the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum, Timipri Silva. Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Also here with us in the studios is the chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Petroleum, Honorable Musa Sarki Ada. Honorable Ada, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you.
And of course, we have Honorable Deacon Sergio Sugun. He's also with us here, and he's an oil and gas expert, a House of Reps member, Committee on Petroleum Upstream and Downstream. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Professor of Petroleum Economics is also here with us this morning. He's Wumi Iladere. Sayo, welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, gentlemen, once again, our delight to have you with us on this program, and in particular, the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum, His Excellency Timipri Silva. I mean, you are in a unique position. You were, at some point, Special Assistant to the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum, who is now a first-class traditional ruler in your state, which is Bayelsa, of which we're also governor. And Bayelsa, of course, is one of the leading oil-producing states in Nigeria. And now you are Minister of State. So you have the benefit of a historical view of the oil and gas industry, at least in recent times. And since you've been in office, and since, of course, you've also been monitoring the Buhari administration before you joined his cabinet, what, in your opinion, has changed and is changing in the oil and gas industry?
I must say that, when you look at it from the historical perspective, you will say that we lost steam as a country. Because as far back as 2006, 2007, when I was still in the Ministry of Petroleum, then as an assistant to the minister, we had a projection to move up oil production from 2 million barrels to 3 million barrels, and then to 4 million barrels by now. But unfortunately, we are struggling to do 2 million barrels today. A country like UAE, which was doing about 2.7 million barrels at that time, has moved up to producing about 4 million barrels per day. It means that a lot went wrong in Nigeria. We didn't really progress much. We couldn't also grow our reserves. We grew our reserves from 22 billion barrels in 2008, from 2000 to 37 billion barrels in 2007. But unfortunately, between 2007 and now, we've only grown our reserves by about 1 billion barrels. So you can see that a lot went wrong. But since we came in, a lot has actually been corrected. I mean, I'm talking about the administration of Muhammadu Buhari. A lot is now being corrected, and we are hoping to see some exponential growth. One of the biggest problems in the industry, as far as I'm concerned, was the non-passage of the PIB. We've been in the process of passing the PIB for about 20 years, and because we are in the process of passing a law, everybody took a sit-down look approach. I mean, they just wanted to wait and see until this law was passed before they can take their investment decisions. And because of this attitude, no additional investment was attracted to the country for a long time. With the Buhari administration, a lot is now going on right in that direction. We've gotten a draft of the PIB, which is, I believe, very acceptable and the most credible version that has been produced since then. And of course, we have a very supportive National Assembly. We believe that this is the right opportunity for us to pass the law. And we believe that in 2 months or 3 months' time, of course, I'm happy that the honourable member is also here, we'll be able to pass this law, and a lot of things will move up. Also, I mean, you look at Train 7, I mean, no major investment in this country has taken off since Egina. Egina was 7 years ago, and since then, there has been no major investment, final investment decision taken. Under the Buhari administration, we've been able to take a final investment decision of over $10 billion, I mean, which is very, very significant. Of course, the AKK pipeline has been in plan for a long time. The AKK pipeline is the pipeline from Ajaokuta to Kaduna to Kano, delivering gas from the south through the OB3 line to the AKK line all the way to Kano, to create that corridor on which you can develop a lot of gas-based investments. Unfortunately, that has not taken off until now, but today, under the Buhari administration, we've been able to take final investment decision, and right now, as we speak, the construction has commenced. So a lot is happening during this administration. I will keep my gunpowder dry at this time because there are others that will also speak.
Yeah, you don't keep it dry, yeah. Because we are still with you. But actually, you've explained a good number of improvements so far since 2015 with respect to reforms in the oil sector. But we are not oblivious of the fact that oil exploration and exploitation in Nigeria has been there for decades. And yet we seem to be grappling with a number of challenges, the ones ought to have been dealt with, over the years. For instance, refining of oil locally. We still depend on importing refined oil, which of course is inimical to whatever economic arrangement that the country has. Let us know what has happened in that direction. And again, local content initiative of Mr. President with respect to oil, whatever oil drilling and other activities that should, of course, involve Nigerians directly. It does seem that because there is this reliance on foreign firms that is affecting the entire business. So what about the local content initiative in this direction? So let's hear more from you, sir.
No, let me start from here. Recently there's been a lot of discussion of deregulation. And that is also a policy direction that is taking long in coming, because we all know as a country that deregulation was very necessary for the continued growth and development of Nigeria, because we cannot continue to subsidize a product which is really one of the key guzzlers of foreign exchange from the country. But today we've been able to achieve it. Now, what is the regulation supposed to achieve? It's supposed to achieve additional investment in the downstream sector. So now what we are saying is that people can now, the regulation is to enable the development of refineries by private sector. Because many times before now, people were saying, look, they won't invest in refineries in Nigeria because of the subsidy. Today, if subsidy is out, then nobody has that excuse anymore. So we are expecting to see a lot of growth in the refining sector as well. But as for the refineries that are owned by government, of course, there are a lot of efforts to rehabilitate those refineries. You must understand, first and foremost, that it was not this administration that destroyed the refineries. These refineries were built, in fact, by the president during, some of them were built by the president during his first time as, of course, as a federal commissioner of petroleum and as head of state. But right now, we actually met refineries that are completely dead. there is a process to actually make sure that these refineries are rehabilitated. We would have started with the rehabilitation of Port Harcourt Refinery. Everything is in place now for the rehabilitation of Port Harcourt Refinery. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has come in to delay the commencement of work because of the restriction in traveling. A lot of people who are supposed to participate in the rehabilitation process could not travel from their countries because of COVID-19. So it has been stalled by COVID-19. But I can assure you that as soon as COVID-19 abates a little bit, we'll get the experts that will be involved in the rehabilitation process, and Port Harcourt Refinery will be rehabilitated. Of course, Warri Refinery also, there is a lot of plan to rehabilitate it. But overarching above all is what I say, the deregulation of the sector will also improve the involvement of private sector in the refining process. But I will not end without saying, look, the modular refineries, I mean, the success of the modular refineries. Already somebody, the newscaster already made my job easier by telling all of us that some modular refineries have already been completed in Imo State and Port Harcourt.
Privately owned or publicly owned?
Privately owned, but enabled by government policy. So that is also happening. A lot of modular refinery projects are ongoing, and I can assure you that very soon, of course, with the Dangote refinery also, very soon Nigeria will be self-sufficient. It's been a very intractable problem for the country, but very soon I believe that the problem of in-country refining will be over. The second point you also, what was your...
Local content.
Local content development. You know that this administration has also excelled in that aspect, participation of local people in the petroleum industry, which was completely absent before now. I mean, I always tell the story of growing up in an oil-producing community as a child, and I remember in those days we were completely spectators. When drilling companies come into the community, behind the community to drill, the whole community will move to go and watch them. And, you know, everybody will go and watch them and marvel at the technological wonders of the white man. That was our participation. That was the extent of our participation in the industry. But today we are no longer spectators. We are part of the production process. From 3%, for example, in ownership of vessels that operate in the oil sector, 3% owned by Nigerians before now, we have moved up to 40%, for example, and targeting to move up to 70% local content participation by 2027. So I believe that Nigeria is doing very well. Other African countries have also taken note of our progress in local content, and they've started asking us to come and even tell them what to do in improving local content participation in their countries too. So this administration has done fantastically well in the integration of Nigerian content in the oil industry.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. You, of course, recently inaugurated the Governing Council, or Governing Board of the Nigerian Content Development and Management Board. There are a number of issues, of course, that are still on the plate for you to chew on, from upstream, midstream, right down to the downstream sector. So let's bring in the other guests who are on the program. Honorable Sergio Ogun, who, of course, is an oil and gas player and is a member of the House of Representatives Committee, Upstream and Downstream. But Honorable Sergio, give us the benefit of your experience, both in the legislature as well as in the oil and gas industry. What is the picture that you have seen in the 5 years of the Buhari administration? Is it any different from what you used to see?
Well, the minister has painted such a glowing picture that if I was not in Nigeria, I would be wondering, oh, maybe this is the best place to invest, which is good, a good departure from what we had initially with this administration, trying to pull down the country. I would say I haven't seen enough, to be honest. I mean, that is my constituency. I thought we could have done more. If you remember when Emmanuel Ibe Kachuku came, he was charged away electronically, you know, and most of us were blown away. His plan, you know, he came in as GMD and Minister of State Petroleum. He had so much power, enormous powers. The direction, the impression he gives, the direction I'm taking NNPC to, maybe by now, if we're talking about 5 years of the Buhari administration, would have been talking about different thing entirely. I'll give you an example of, he has said by 2017, NNPC will go public. You know, we're talking about IPO in 2017 or so. But I think after they took the portfolio of the GMD from him, that changed. And if that had happened, I'm sure would have gone very far. So that we dropped the ball at that point, if you ask me. Look at Saudi Aramco. You know, they went public and they became the biggest company in the world. You know, biggest company after Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. Even when their proven reserves were in doubt. You know, so why can't we do that? Now we have an NNPC that's supposed to be a cash cow. But if you ask me here, how many of us know anything about NNPC? We don't know anything about NNPC. NNPC is almost running like a parallel government. You are building hospital here today. Tomorrow you are giving out buses in Jos or anywhere part of the country and all that. And the major reason, which I think my chairman, Honorable Sada, is going to, maybe I should actually leave that to him, because of the laws. The NNPC does not submit itself, its budget, to the National Assembly. So it's running like a parallel government. Section 7, sub 5 of the NNPC, Petroleum Act, NNPC Act, declares clearly that they submit their budget to National Council of Ministers. And who is the chairman of that council? The president. You know, this is against all the laws of this country. I mean, section 81 to 84 of the Constitution clearly explains how the president will lay the budget and how the approval for appropriation will be gotten from the National Assembly. A clear departure from that. And given the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, clearly from section 18, clearly states how the processes for preparing MTF and all that should be handled. You know, then section 21, sub 1 to 3, again, how corporations, I mean, government agencies should prepare their budgets and hand over to the Minister of Finance, and then who will send the draft to the president, and president will lay the budget before the parliament and all that. So in all this, where did we get anything that NNPC can prepare budget within the executive, approve, and not without recourse to the National Assembly? So that is where the major problem is coming from. So we would have thought that by the time the company is sold, I'm careful to use that word sold, because one of the candidates during the last election said he was going to sell NNPC. And people that I think are very illiterate said so many things, you know. LNG, Nigeria liquefied natural gas. The Nigerian government has 49% stake. You know, say Shell, Total, Eni have 51. Thank God that the Honorable Minister is here. LNG is doing perfectly well. Why can't we model NNPC after NLNG? Why can't we do that? So to me, those are missed steps and missed opportunities. If we had taken some of those actions when the president came there with Kachuku there, I thought would have gone very far.
Honorable, I'm not stopping you, but I want to prompt you up in some of the things that you raised, because it's important that you explain those things properly. Before now, the Minister of State had just said that the PIB bill, you know, petroleum industry bill, you know, ought to have addressed certain maybe structural arrangement or whatever it is within the oil and gas sector. That he said that if it is passed, that is going to right a lot of wrongs. The bill, of course, you know, that it seeks to increase the government revenue from oil and of course lay down some and strengthen regulations, for the operation of the sector. Now, would it have not been important that the bill, when passed, can address the issue you are raising with respect to NNPC?
PIB is even obsolete, if you ask me. If you had sold NNPC, or privatized, that's the word, privatized NNPC, PIB basically would have, we have been on this in the last 12 years, the PIB. Like maybe my chairman again will speak more about that. He's been more involved in the bill than myself. I'm a rookie when it comes to when PIB came to Parliament and where we are today. I'm sure he will speak more about that. Yes, the minister said that clearly. Without the PIB, if I come here today, I said I want to invest in cameras or anything, and I don't know how much I'm going to get from it, why would I invest in it? So, like I said, the minister already handled that. The PIB actually set the industry back. Yeah, because the major players are not investing. There's been no new investment. So maybe that also, like the minister said, affected or has affected our reserves. Okay. Then even the independents, that came, they came and they let start oil, and all that. They came and left, sold up and left. Because you need to know the future of your investment and how much that will come from it. But what I'm saying here today, I just give an example of the Saudi Aramco. You sell, and then allow, and I also mentioned the NLNG. If you have a corporation like that you have foreign investors, and if you go to NLNG today, the managing director of NLNG is my very good friend, Tony Attap. But he doesn't have powers, the kind of powers that the GMD of NNPC has. It's the board. That's what we are saying. When you have a company like NNPC, that's where the 90% of our foreign reserve comes from. And then you have people there taking orders from the presidency, no recourse to the National Assembly.
Okay, Honorable Sergio Sogun, you mentioned this point in terms of the reporting lines of, say, the NNPC, which is founded on their own laws. That is the laws setting them up and the laws governing the operation of NNPC, which PIB, as Kirian also pointed out, ought to have addressed. I'm sure the chairman of the House Committee is here. Part of the rationale for the PIB was to say, look, the principal legislation governing the Nigerian oil and gas industry was the one enacted in 1969, being the Petroleum Act, together, of course, with regulations made thereunder, and the NNPC Act of 1977. But regardless, in 5 years, what is it that you have observed in the oil and gas industry? Has there been a game changer?
Yes, thank you very much asking this question to me, and I appreciate that you asked just before me, and it appears there's balancing after the nurse have spoken. With my experience in the parliament exceeding a decade and an active player in the PIB, the changes that have happened are quite encouraging and enormous. Here we were, or there we were, in 2010, when PIB was first introduced, was submitted to the National Assembly, and at that moment, members of the National Assembly didn't know which document to work with. At a time, there were 3 versions of the PIB. The improvement and achievement we are seeing in the last 5 years is the seeming transparency and willingness to carry major stakeholders, including the National Assembly, along. We have been engaging with the Honorable Minister in the past, though it wasn't enough. I'm saying this because he said, even though I have not seen this, it's not enough. By now, we should have more robust discussions with them. They have been telling us we're at this level, we're at that level, which we had never had before. This document will be submitted to us, and they will want to stampede the National Assembly, pass it within a period of time. We have so many hiccups from going to Lagos for what was supposed to have been a retreat between we and the NNPC and other major oil stakeholders, which would be absolutely disrupted. Without any progress, will come back. One thing that was militating against the passage of PIB then was, in court, lack of proper sensitization and involvement of National Assembly from the concept of the PIB, which has now been taken care of. As I have said, we have been having discussion with him and my colleagues. And I told our committee just 2 days ago, we had a meeting that we are embarking on the oversight of all the processes under the purview of the Petroleum Committee on Upstream, and we have requested them to submit basic information to us. One of the things that I just mentioned there has been an issue of concern by members of the National Assembly. NNPC, in particular, felt above the board. But this time around, I'm seeing difference. Maybe that was because of the long time existence of the military regime in those days. Ministers, GMDs were appointed by the military and they were taking one direction of line communication. They were not used to the parliament. So when the parliament now comes in, it was difficult for them to graduate from that thinking to come and align themselves with the reality of the supremacy of the constitution. The PIB will solve all that. All the problems that we are having with the local and international investors is the fear of the unknown. Because when you don't have a particular, a standard law that regulates your performance and that can secure and guarantee your investment, nobody will come. Many investors operating within Nigeria and those willing to come and invest in Nigeria have approached us then, pass this bill that will guarantee our coming. Nobody will bring his dollar or his naira or his franc or whatever to invest where the law does not protect him. If you invest today, the law have guaranteed you that you will get your money back, and tomorrow somebody come and changes that law because there's no existing law that gives you cover. So I hope and I pray within the shortest possible time, this PIB will come to us and will be able to pass it, so all this will come to pass. Even the issue of privatization or commercialization or selling of NPC doesn't arise. With the PIB, in fact, a new structure is coming up that will take care of so many loopholes in the oil industry. And all the bottlenecks that are happening will be eradicated by the PIB. I'm glad that my member of the committee is also here. He's a ranking member of the House, and I give them enough time to put their input in whatever we do. And all my colleagues we are about 6 chairmen of the committee, gas, downstream, upstream, in the House and the Senate. We are working together with synergy. And this time around, I believe there won't be any misgiving, because, like I said, there's a seeming transparency and accountability in the PIB that is coming to us. I only pray the Honourable Minister have preempted that we are 1% in 3 months. I would love to tell him no. So it will be fast as when due. But I'm not saying I'm going to stand on here to delay it unnecessarily.
So I think from his explanation, it appears that the PIB will take care of a number of issues in the oil and gas sector, and I want your colleague to also appreciate the fact that PIB is not obsolete as he mentioned earlier on, because from what I've said, it does. There's a reformed PIB that will of course ensure the strengthening of a legal and the regulatory framework in the oil and gas sector. And I'm also sure that the components of that PIB, the things that could be done to take care of an NPC issue, is encapsulated in that PIB. All right, let us bring in Professor Eladere here.
I wanted to say something there. If I would agree with Sergio, the word obsolete used is too harsh, but something like that appeared there. What happened there? There was seeming misunderstanding of the whole process of PIB. Like I said, the then government which brought it to us was not transparent enough, didn't carry us along, and from our side, we are driven by sentiments. Okay. I always tell them we should work as a team, as a Nigerian, regardless of the party affiliation. We are going to work for Nigeria. Because this hour, let me tell you, I had voted against PIB 3 times. This hour, I'll vote for PIB and I'll campaign for it to be passed. Not because I chair the committee, not because I'm chairing the committee, because I have proper understanding, and because I have believed that those stumbling blocks have been extracted out of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's why you are chairman of that committee. Born again chairman who now has a better understanding of the contents of the PIB. Okay, Professor Eladio, you've listened to the chairman, listened to the Honorable Minister of State, and also Ogun. What's our take? Look at the upstream, downstream sector of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. What's your take with respect to the 5 years of Buhari administration in this area? With respect to the 5 years of Buhari administration in this area.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. And like I always say, my constituency is Nigeria.
To be having a mix-up there, audio mix-up, we're receiving some signals from some place. But we're going to return to Professor Ladera very shortly when the issue must have been taken care of by our engineer. So back to our studio here. Honorable Minister, you may have to also respond to the issues raised by the chairman of the committee and
Kieran, if you don't mind, I mean the principal focus of the chairman of the House Committee has been on PIB. Yes, the PIB is been touted as a potential game changer in the industry, but there are other aspects. In other words, the oil and gas industry has been at work in 5 years of the Buhari administration without the PIB on the basis of existing legislation and regulations, which is why I'm coming back to the Honorable Minister. Let's focus one more time on the upstream sector. You've talked about some of the challenges that we've had in terms of growing our reserves and also tracking our production to be sure that indeed we ramp up our production. There was always the nagging issue of so-called cash calls. If you recall, about 20 years, 15 years ago, they said the oil majors were not interested because we were in arrears with respect to our cash calls, and therefore they were not proceeding. What has happened now with regard to cash calls on the one hand? Then we also saw divestment by the oil majors, divestment from the oil majors, which led to the so-called marginal fields, where you have local players. In other words, as you used to say in the past, rather than being just spectators where the oil majors were prospecting, you also have Nigerian oil players in the marginal fields. How well have they been doing in 5 years? And how well have we been doing with regard to cash calls, which was always a major issue with the oil majors?
Thank you very much. First, let me just take the issue of privatization of NNPC, which the honourable member harped on. I do not believe that you judge the success of a whole administration just on one aspect, something that you expect, just one thing that you expect to happen in that administration. Yes, some people expected that NNPC should have been privatized or maybe sold, as they even say, by now. But when you even say that, when you talk about Saudi Aramco, really, how successful has the IPO, Saudi Aramco been after the IPO? I mean, we cannot go into those details. Frankly, this is not the forum for us to begin to debate on the success or lack of success of the IPO, the Saudi Aramco IPO. So this is something for a different time and venue. But as for the privatization, the movement, or let's say the growth of NNPC, I would say that even if we were to privatize, if we were to move from where we are to the next point, you must have a legal framework. And that is why the PIB cannot be obsolete. The PIB already, if we're going to just give a little sneak peek, is going to move the NNPC to be a limited company. It's going to be a commercial, the NNPC is going to be commercialized. I mean, that is one step further to the IPO that the honorable member is talking about. So the PIB actually is going to help us to even grow us to the next level. As for cash calls, luckily that is now a thing of the past, more or less, because we found certain solutions to the cash call problem. The cash call was such that, okay, what was cash call? Government, NNPC owned 60% of the joint venture. The IOC owned 40% of the joint venture. The IOC is the operator of the joint venture. They put their money for the next year, the investment for the next year, and then they expect the federal government to match them with the 60%. Meanwhile, the federal government, the 60% of the federal government came into the federation account, and because the federation account was a zero account, it has been shared. So the federal government doesn't have any money left to contribute to the 60%. So you find out that there was always a problem. But operationally, they've been able to find some solutions. Innovation, for example, is a solution. For the oil companies now are allowed to go and look for the money, and then we reconcile later on. So that they are not really waiting and expecting that the federal government will contribute their cash call first before they continue. Those issues have been, over the years, tackled. And I believe that, of course, with the commercialization of NNPC, with the PIB, hopefully, we believe that some of those other problems will also be resolved.
There was the other leg of the question, marginal fields.
Okay, yes, marginal fields was not a divestment process at all. Let's understand marginal field. Marginal field is not a divestment process at all. Marginal field is, why are the fields called marginal? Because these are small fields, which the big oil companies do not find profitable because of their big overheads. They are too big to produce a 5,000 barrels per day well. They are too big to produce a 2,000 barrel per day well. So they cap it, they just lock it up because they feel that these are too small for them. So they locked all these smaller fields. And they were not doing anything with these fields because they were just too small. They were considered marginal for them. So now the federal government said, look, we cannot just, these marginal fields may be marginal for the big oil companies, but for small players, they will still be very useful. So let's involve Nigerians through marginal fields. So now call Nigerians to participate in the marginal field program so that they now take the smaller fields and produce the smaller fields. And that way we've really been able to improve the participation of Nigerians in the industry. Today, Nigerians account for 15% of the production in Nigeria, which is a big jump.
All right, sir. Thank you.
And 60% of gas production, Nigerians account for 60% of gas production in Nigeria.
Yes, we're still going to go to gas because there was a hint that the country may start producing methanol, which is a good substitute for petroleum, in which case we have gas, enough gas, trillions of cubic meters of gas in the country that could be used to do that because it's a precursor for the production of methanol. That will be, in the course of the program. But let's get back to Professor Eladare. So I hope your line is clearer now, and I hope also that you can hear me. Would like you to come in here with your opening remarks. And the question, of course, I'm sure is still fresh in your mind. That's your take on the 5 years of Buhari administration in oil and gas industry with respect to upstream, downstream. Just from any perspective that we want to take it, let's hear from you in your own personal assessment of the direction the country has gone, the direction of oil and gas.
Thank you again and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and it's a pleasure to express opinion. I would like to say that I'm not evaluating Buhari's regime. I'm looking at the oil and gas industry performance from one period to another period, and I don't want to blame any other regime. I'm only going to speak to what I observe in the industry and give a perspective as to what I think could be done. I hope I have about 5 minutes to give my brief remarks. First of all, I need to think about the positive things that have happened over the last 5 years. And then I'll look at the challenges and perhaps give opportunity, if time permits, of what I think we need to do. First, if there's anything to celebrate in Nigeria within the last 5 years, is the local content implementation. And that has to do with the chief executive and his team for making sure that we find a way to link the oil and gas industry into the economic expectations in Nigeria. There's still room for improvement in that particular regard. I like they are trying to build funding capacity in the National Content Board, and I also like the fact that they don't personalize power. The board of directors is very involved in terms of what they do. If we are going to look at the performance of a particular period against another period, I took time since I learned that I'll be coming here to look at certain indicators. I look at oil production, I look at gas production, I look at the reserves life, and I look at reserve replacement ratio, I look at the price of oil, I look at things like extraction pattern, the number of rigs, the number of wells, and the number of completed wells, the number of... And unfortunately, I wish I could be as optimistic as the minister with respect to period comparison. I have a graph here which I cannot show, and you are going to see out of these 9 indicators, in 2011 to 2015, 6 of them were going in the positive direction. From 2015 to 2019, 6 of them were going in the negative direction. You cannot blame any government for that because these are probably beyond government's control to a large extent. The number of rigs has gone down by almost 50%. Price of oil has gone down by almost 57%. The oil production has gone down, reserves have not moved an inch, and so on and so forth. Now, what could the administration have done? One must commend the first 4 years of this administration in terms of passing a policy gazette. We call it Petroleum Policy Document. It was passed. And then we also passed the natural gas policy document, which are more or less one of the reasons why my association gave the former minister a recognition as an energy public sector performance. Now, having said that, I need to respond to certain things because this is an opportunity to give public education. Let's take NNPC, for example. I mean, I think NNPC reminds me of OPEC. Every woe that Nigeria has, they want to blame NNPC for it, which is a misconception. I was in a meeting the other time, and some people thought NNPC is a regulator. And that's why the PIGB was put into place, to be able to separate the responsibility of the institutions that govern the oil and gas industry. Regulatory institution is different from commercial institution, and so on and so forth. The National Oil Company is a necessary tool that the national government can use to participate in the reward that we get from our oil and gas exploration. I will not support any idea of selling an NNPC, but funding an NNPC is different from selling an NNPC, and those misconceptions must be taken out. Inviting people to buy shares that's what you have with LLNG. LLNG structure is different from NNPC structure. I want to address that. Let me quickly also address the downstream, because there's this also misconception that you can deregulate price and still have PEF and PPPRA. In the PIGB, this was well stated, and I happen to be very fortunate to be part and parcel of that. If there's any mistake the previous administration did, was not passing the PIGB at that particular time. And it's also not correct to say that the executive was not put into consideration when the PIGB was being molded. The PIGB was presented even to the Federal Executive Council, and I happen to be fortunate to be part of the team who did that. I think we should move away from sentiments and what I call sentiments and patronage in deciding what is good for the future. Again, I do not think you can deregulate the downstream and still keep PEF and keep PPPRA. Now you can redefine their responsibility. I also want to talk to the marginal field. It's a very good idea, an excellent idea to find a way to get Nigerians involved in participating in the oil and gas sector. But let me quickly advise, without any consultation field, that when you are going to give out the next marginal field, there are two things you need to put into consideration: technical competence before funding competence. And I would suggest you encourage partnership rather than using it as a way to make millionaires that we have done in the past. And then I think you need to put a weight in terms of the experience in operating marginal oil field. And then you need to then think in terms of value creation for addition. And I want to address the government from an outside perspective. Petroleum industry reform is not about how to get more money. It has to be about how to add value. And that's why I want to encourage the National Assembly with what's going on with the petroleum reform that you are doing. Please, I plead with you. Try to evaluate it very well. Take sentiments and patronage out of it. Because the governance of the oil and gas industry today is a bill that was passed in 1969. If you look at the number of years there, we are still using it. So the one you are going to get in 2020 must pass the test of time. Let it be scrutinized. Let it be reviewed. Let it be analyzed. Let it be evaluated so that future generation will be able to do something. I just completed a study recently when I was comparing the fiscal system of all the countries that are similar to Nigeria. And you'll be surprised that the driving force for nearly anything we do in the oil and gas sector is access to revenue. That cannot continue. The principal objective should be value creation and value addition. And that brings me to the midstream. Listen, the oil and gas industry has so many sub-business units within it. Each of them can stand alone and each of them could be vertically integrated. I want to encourage this government. I want to think about value creation, not access to gross revenue. Because access to gross revenue has led us to prebendalistic lifestyle, which is not necessarily engaging our youth. And finally, let me bring my constituency, I'm going to stop. The best way to use oil money is to build infrastructure, build mined infrastructure, so that there can be transferred knowledge from one generation to the other. Let us begin to think of how to use this oil money to build human mind, because we are thinking about knowledge economy going forward. Knowledge economy is what sustained India, is what sustained nearly every country that we were ahead of before now. It is knowledge economy of the 70s that allow you to have people like me, to the glory of God, who has had the opportunity to participate worldwide with respect to how to use oil money. And finally, to my legislators, Petroleum Management Bill is as important as Petroleum Governance Bill. Let's work on that. Let us think about posterity more than prosperity. And it is the oil and gas industry that's going to be the engine to drive the diversification of Nigerian economy. If it fails, the economy of Nigeria will not be diversified. So let us work hard so that by the end of this year, the Petroleum Governance Bill, the Petroleum Fiscal Bill, the Petroleum Administration
Oh, well, Professor Wumi Lenare, thank you very much. We know you're still writing on your lecture, we will have the opportunity of returning to you. I mean, you've made very valid contributions to our discussion. You said you wanted to have 5 minutes, but we gave you much longer time, much longer time than that. Thank you very much, Professor Wumi Ledere, always our guests on oil and gas issues. But just before we bring in again the lawmakers, Seju Sogun and Honorable Ada, I want to come back to the Honorable Minister, because there's a lot to talk about in midstream, which of course has to do with your pipelines, and then the downstream and the issues that he's talked about. He was talking about PF, which is the Petroleum Equalization Fund, and PPPROA, which is the Price Regulatory Agency. There are some knotty issues in the oil and gas industry, and from time to time, NATI, which is the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, issues its reports. In fact, last year, it had a roundtable on product theft, which is one of the major headaches that the Nigerian economy has suffered. Some say we don't know how much we produce because there's no proper metering. Some say that, okay, what we produce is lost on account of stealing or poor accounting, and that even what is taken through the existing pipelines, the ones that have not been vitalized, often also get lost on account of all kinds of issues. How have we tried to deal with these critical issues in the past 5 years?
Well, I will say that, when people say that we don't know what we produce, it's a very, it's not something to take on face value. We do know how much we produce at the pump, at the wellhead. Now, every oil company knows how much they produce at the wellhead. But how much of it arrives in the tank? That's the question, because there is a disparity, because a lot of it is lost in the process of movement from the wellhead to the tank. So, of course, Nigeria as a country, we know what arrives at the tank. So nobody can say that we don't know how much arrives at the tank. But, of course, midway, a lot happens, and that is where your question becomes very relevant. How have we dealt with this issue of theft? I believe that crude oil theft has been a very serious problem that we need to deal with as a country. I still use the present tense because it is not completely over. But at this point, I will say that we've actually lowered the level of theft. I mean, at some point, some companies actually were losing up to 50% of their production. That means that they produce at the wellhead, and only 50% of that production arrives at the tank. Midway, 50% of it was lost. But with a combination of a lot of efforts, I think we've been able to tackle this issue of crude oil theft. One of the issues I believe that we must take on board are the producing communities. You cannot stop when they come with all kind of highfalutin solutions, or drones to look at this and so on. I don't believe in those solutions, because you send a drone to go and monitor a pipeline. You see someone is vandalizing the pipeline. Okay, you get the information at the base station that this so pipeline in the mangrove is being tampered with. By the time you arrive at the point where it is being tampered with, the people would have finished their job and they would have left, because the response time is not that fast. And you know that these pipelines crisscross our forests and mangroves. So you must involve the locals. I believe that there is no crude oil theft that will take place without the knowledge. I'm not saying involvement, but I'm saying the knowledge of the locals. So with a combination of the oil companies, the locals, and law enforcement, the oil companies, the local, and law enforcement, we've been able to at least control a lot of this theft now. Right now, it is maybe if it was 50%, we are losing probably 10% of production It's not really as bad as it used to be, but that is not the aspiration. The aspiration is to end oil theft completely, and hopefully by the end of this tenure, we would have completely eradicated oil theft in Nigeria.
Yes, Honorable Minister of State, it takes two to tango. Some people even talk about official theft, and of course the locals that you mentioned. But one point you mentioned that is very crucial here is that of a drone. Because technology has appeared to be the best company of man, in terms of security. You said drone, then security. Yes, of course, because if you are informed about the theft going on, that is a clear information or indication that people in that area is prone. All right, so if you don't catch the thief, then you could fortify the area to ensure it doesn't happen again. Because with that technology, it will be practically impossible to monitor the corridor, the oil.
Let me say this. You see, what I'm just saying is that you can hardly catch the thief while he is on the job.
Well, okay.
You can hardly catch him because he's taking some precautions, and you yourself, your response time will not be as swift. So by the time you get there, the thief has left. But that should not be the end of the problem. My solution, why I said the communities must be involved is this. Now, all these oil thieves are known by the communities. They are known. They are not ghosts. So if a thief goes, he steals oil, is living large on it, everybody knows them.
Exactly.
So now, you don't catch him while he's stealing. But if you have good information, if the government and the oil companies and the law enforcement has good information from the locals about the thieves, the oil thieves, then the best time to catch the oil thief is when he's enjoying his loot.
All right.
So you see, at that time, he hasn't taken any precautions.
Okay.
So while he's enjoying it, maybe in a big party that he is thrown to enjoy his loot, you arrest him while he's doing that.
All right.
And then
so the locals must be involved.
Yes,
that's,
exactly.
that's part of security.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Of course, we're looking at the Buhari administration in the last 5 years with respect to oil and gas industry. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we will get back to the conversation.
Nigerians, coronavirus is dangerous. It can kill. When you see this sign, high fever, cough, shortness of breath, drowsiness, pneumonia, don't panic, don't hide, don't embark in self-medication. Promptly visit the nearest medical facility. Report all cases to the nearest hospital. Prevention is key. Avoid contact with infected persons. Avoid crowded areas as much as possible. Wash your hands regularly. Use hand sanitizers. Your life is precious. Stay alive. Live long, live right. This message is sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture and the Nigerian Film Corporation. Nigerian Film Corporation, powering possibility.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 2255 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
We have observed the lockdown. We have practiced the measures in order to curb the spread of the virus, but we can do better. The coronavirus spread is increasing daily, and only together can we cut down the numbers and defeat the spread of the virus. Remember, COVID-19 is not a death sentence, and a recovered patient cannot spread the disease. Do not stigmatize. Do not hesitate to report any case, or if you have come in contact with anybody that has been infected with COVID-19. If you have cough and fever, please stay at home and call your state hotline. Find state numbers at www.covid19.ncdc.gov.ng. Remember, it is for your own good and for the good of every Nigerian. Let us do better and defeat the virus. Together, we can do this. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. So let's once again bring in the other guest, Honorable Sergio Sogun, who is a member of the upstream and downstream petroleum sector of the House Committee. And also we have the chairman of that committee, Honorable Musa Sarki Ada. Both of them are still with us in the studios. Honorable Sergio Sogun, what the average Nigerian will see will be the impact or effect of the downstream sector. But we're talking about the upstream sector. For some of our viewers, these are big money issues. At the end of the day, those big money issues affect our pocket. But for us to move around on a daily basis, there are things that we used to see which we no longer see. Fuel queues have disappeared. How the magic was brought about, nobody really cares. But at the end of the day, you go to the pump, you go to the fuel station to buy, and then you have your petrol dispensed for you. That's been the lingering issue of exactly how to handle our refineries. What is it that you are saying? Because NNPC had its own deadline. They said, I think it was supposed to be Q1 2020, that the refineries were supposed to have been set up. Then, the goalpost has now been shifted. Exactly what would you like to see the government ramp up? Yes, stable fuel supplies, no question about that. But what else do we need to do so that when a shock comes, we can absorb it and then quickly get over it?
Well, why I will not give a pass mark to this government in the last 5 years.
You must be a very strict lecturer.
Yes. Because why I'm going there? Because now I'm very happy that my chairman is very optimistic about PIB. One pill cannot kill this virus or this disease. That's why Kachuku, when he came, he said, okay, we'll do it in piecemeal. And he didn't succeed. I'm not a pessimistic person. I address issues the way I see them, and I have strong faith in Nigeria. The mistake we have been making in the last 12 years, we are still making it now. That PIB will just come and solve all the problem in the oil industry. It will not. In this studio, I said, Ghana took a piece of our PIB, took it to Ghana and passed it. During the OTC, I asked the people that worked on it, what happened? They explained that even the legislators were the ones even telling the executive, bring it and let's work on it. There were so many interests that came up. They listened to them. They were humble. I said, look, we need to pass this. We can always come back and amend it. That's what I think we should have done years ago. Pass B. In this country, we believe we must get it. It must be perfect. There's no one that's perfect except God. No country is perfect. So having said that, that is why I say I cannot give this government a pass mark. Because we've had 5 years now. We are still talking about where. And in another 3 years, this government will be out. And I'm sorry to say, we must still be saying the same thing. The minister has said, I think there was something I read that he said something about the PIB will be passed in May, and I was like, hello? So you know what we would do as legislators? We are supposed to bring that and we'll tear it apart, make our contribution, and then send a bill that will be acceptable to Nigerians, to the president to assent. So PIB might not even pass this year. Although my chairman is very, very optimistic, it might not even pass this year. So, having said that, let me go back to the downstream you asked. I believe strongly we should have sold refineries years ago when Obasanjo put them up for sale. The Honorable Minister is talking about work should have started in refineries, if not for COVID. Well, maybe you have to put them in a particular shape before you sell. Because now, I think the government is going to borrow $500 million for NTA. But China is making profit, billions. AIT and others. Dangote refinery will come upstream now. Will government borrow him money to run it? It will make profit. So I disagree with Prof. When he says what NNPC needs is funding. What funding again? Even when we don't know how you are spending the money you are making. So which funding again are we talking about? Give them more money? Or the contracts are opaque? Even the DSDP. Most of the contractors that have the 1 year contract now, they were involved in the scam of the swap. Most of them are still there again. So have we moved forward? No. If anything, we are moving backward. So yeah, I'm happy to hear about the deregulation. And again, that's what I think is the misstep The National Assembly even invited, the House invited Kachuku when we were having issues. And it was dropping all this price modulation, which the Minister of State also mentioned the last time. You know, just deregulate the downstream sector, period. People that can bring in products, let them bring in, have inspection companies at the port to make sure that it meets our requirements.
No, yeah, but is it a question? Because this is, I mean, we have been on deregulation for, I don't know, over 25 years or more. Is it a question of, say, deregulate so they can bring in products as we find with AGO, which is diesel, or deregulate so that the many licenses that were issued in the past for, you know, greenfield projects, those licenses can be either revived and utilized. If we say deregulate so that people can bring in, we'll be exporting our jobs and then accelerating poverty back home. What's your response, Honorable?
It's part of it. That's why we say we are waiting for this law that will solve every problem. Because with the law, with the PIB, maybe we will have more investors come back. Those independents that sold and left, even the big majors will explore more. So we'll probably have managed our upstream very well. Then that's when it takes the likes of Dangote, maybe they are partially even government, that can invest in that sector right now. How am I going to invest in a sector when the government is fixing the price? That's why everybody's talking about deregulation. Hands off completely.
I think that has even answered the question, you know, what you have just said, answered the question, you know.
You want me to say something?
Before you do that, Honorable Minister of State, before you do that, Honorable Goon, I think you have answered this question, you know, by the way you just simply put it, you know, that nobody wants to put his money in a business that government will fix the price. I mean, people want the return for the investment. But before I leave you, I want to remind you, or rather, inform you that the NTA has never been given 500 million naira.
They are going to give you now. That's what the budget that came. That's what they are borrowing the money for. That's what they are going to. I mean, the Minister of Information said it. They're going to give you $500 million dollars to do whatever.
You are an honorable member. We are the people that inform. You know, we inform.
But that's what you presented to us.
And as soon as we have the information.
No, before you bring in the honorable minister, let me just clear. Let me clear. When I'm support of, you know, foreign investors or investors getting involved in the management of our oil, they let them bring the money. The minister is talking about people talking about drones and people. Look at the Saudi. They have a control room. Even the pipe you are talking about, people are breaking. Technology can trip off that product. You can trip it off. Now you're talking about drone, talking about helicopter.
All right, Nigerians always felt that Nigerians always feel that whatever is happening elsewhere is better than what is happening.
It can happen here.
And I always ask, look at this. I mean, we are now talking about police brutality in the U.S. Before now, we are the butt of every joke by our comedians. Oh, when police people go to arrest anybody in America, they will give you, they come here, they are very nice, but in Nigeria, our police, but suddenly we are seeing that it is not everything that is rosy out there. So, I mean, don't bring all this Saudi Aramco idea, Saudi Aramco example, everything that is happening. It's not whatever is happening there that is the best thing. I mean, their terrain is completely different from ours. Theirs is a desert terrain. No trees, no forest. Their pipelines pass through the desert. So from 1 mile away, you can actually survey the whole pipeline versus our own pipelines that pass in the thick forests. So it's not the same thing we are looking at, please. We are looking at different terrains, different environment, and let us try and at least evaluate what is Nigeria and appreciate Nigeria.
Exactly. We have to have Nigerian solution to Nigeria's problem. Let's stop it there and bring it to
technology. If you allow me to learn this, it's technology I'm talking about. That technology is not physical. It can start from the control room. That can trigger, can trip off the pipe, produce the product in the pipe. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly, and drone can also play a role here. Let's begin, Chairman, please. Yes. Let's move away from this perspective and to another. Nigeria has had the history of oil boom in the past. And if you listen to Professor Ladere, he was talking about what we did with oil money. That the money from oil should be invested in infrastructure and the likes. Right, so we had oil boom in the 70s, in the 80s, mid-90s, even 2005 to 2008. We've had oil boom, and it does seem as if the money was not properly utilized. In your own assessment, what has happened with respect to utilization of revenue from oil by this administration in the last 5 years?
I will, first of all, not be partisan, but it's quite impressive. At the time this new resolution came in 2015, there were serious challenges of financial availability, especially by the states. We all remember bailout had to be given to about almost 30 states. The Paris Club was shared at the same time. If not, many of them couldn't have even paid their salaries, and by now there would be chaos in this country. And since then, prudent measures have been put in place of all monies accrued into the Federation account till now. Much of the money have been geared towards agricultural development. We have good agricultural output as of now, with the ban of importation of rice, though not eliminated completely, but it has helped. By the way, I would like to move away from this to say something. With what you have been arguing with my colleague here, let me share this. No technology, no effort, no any assessment or evaluation can solve our problem but our minds, the way we think and the way we behave. Everything that is attributed to the success or otherwise of our society is by the people there. We must believe in Nigeria, we must believe in transparency, we must believe we should not be selfish. If we the leaders are accountable and transparent in our actions, the downtrodden who are now hibernated to become uptrodden in criminality wouldn't have been there. I don't believe everybody is born criminal. It is society that breeds your behaviors. All of us were born saints by our respective families, and were brought up in our different cultures to be saint and to be good people. It's midway, just like you have midstream in the oil and gas. So it's a midway.
All right.
Yes, most of the criminals became criminals after they finished their secondary schools, going to the university, or from there going to look for a job. So the government of the day have done its best by trying to engage the youth by providing employment through many palliative measures, though they are not enough.
Okay.
Let me finish. No. Let me finish this. At the time this government came, I could remember during the campaign, nobody would think of subsidy removal in this country. It became an enigma. It was dreaded. Nobody wanted to hear it because people misunderstood how much the country was losing from the subsidy. Now the subsidy is almost gone. But
is it almost or it's gone?
I say almost gone.
It's gone because we had the Minister of Finance here tell us that it is gone.
Okay, now, it is gone, but do you know one thing? The subsidy, who are subsidized? You and I, the elites. Until now, the major beneficiary of that subsidy are supposed to be the common man, who uses truck to go and till his land with tractor, or Tifa to go and carry his sons to go to a building construction site. Or let me finish, I have to finish this. Or the transporter who carries his goods from Lagos to the north, from the Maiduguri to Lagos to carry his cacao and beans. Oil, AGO is still expensive. But those that are driving luxury vehicles, you and I and the minister who have 2, 3, 10 cars, have been subsidized, and we don't need that one. Let me finish this. Let me finish
You're talking
this.
about luxury cars.
Let me finish.
You don't want us to raise the issue of the new cars that the House members have.
You can raise our father. You can raise our You can raise our father.
He has raised it already.
He has raised it. We won't press it. We won't press it because that one, you know. But just
one is a no-go.
Invite me whenever you want to discuss.
Just one point very quickly, because Honorable Sergio Sogun, talked about the facility that the NTA, of course, is proposing, and why NTA is trying to get all of that. Let's get a few things clear. You remember that the Director General of the NTA was at the National Assembly, and he was speaking to some of your honorable and distinguished colleagues, and he said, look, NTA is a public broadcaster, which indeed what it is, on the basis of the 1977 Act that sets up the NTA. If the president is having a program, or the presidency is having a program, and they say it should be taken live, is NTA going to ask the president's office to pay for that?
Of course.
Of course. NTA doesn't do that under the current arrangement. NTA cannot because it's a public broadcaster. And when you also look at, but other stations, of course, will charge for it. And so they'll make more money. But NTA also has the largest network on the African continent. Its platforms are many. And I'm sure sometimes you complain and say, oh, you know, why don't you change some of your equipment? Those equipment will cost money. And you wouldn't know whether a private broadcaster is also taking a facility from a private financial institution.
Of course,
which
yes.
will, of course, pay back.
Of course, yes.
But in this case, what NTA is getting is not a grant. It's a lot which will pay back on account of its own business. But that's a business model that we'll discuss at some point. we wouldn't also get into the luxury car. Is it a Camry or Lexus that we got? I don't know. Brand new. V8. From Japan. Yeah, because they say that when ministers come to see them, when you see the nice cars they drive, and they themselves are sitting in the house and supposed to be supervising them, it's always on this side. Professor Ledare, let's come back to you. Professor Ledare, you talked about a number of points. Very quickly, I would like you were going to get into the midstream sector, which is very critical because it's critical, for instance, to our product distribution, which is still a major challenge on account of vandalism. It's also critical to our gas master plan. What is it that we have seen done in terms of ramping up, the midstream sector in conjunction with the downstream?
Again, thank you very much. Glad you have a lively discussion there. The industry must be optimized along the value chain. And the midstream is very critical if you are going to deliver to the downstream. And I don't want the oil and gas industry to run into the same problem that we have with the electric power industry, where it doesn't matter how much you generate, if you cannot evacuate, then it's inconsequential. So we have neglected the midstream. And the minister said it right when the current president was the commissioner of petroleum and even the head of state. We are very, very well invested infrastructure in the midstream petroleum sector, but we don't use it. And there's no way I can talk about midstream being effective without talking about petroleum subsidy. Because petroleum subsidies in Nigeria have actually maximized our welfare loss. And so until we think about that subsidy where we burn about 1/4 of our budget at the tailpipe, there's no way in which the midstream can be profitable, because there must be proper tariff that is set to be able to move product along the value chain to end users. And the idea of equalization fund may be just dissolved, and perhaps you can think in terms of industrialization fund, because without adequate funding capacity, you cannot optimize your midstream to the effect that people will come and invest in it. And so if you don't deregulate your downstream, midstream will not be successful. You are just going to have the same type of problem you have with the electric power sector, where you are having all of this kata and the TCN. And that's why I want the national, to me, I think the National Assembly underestimate the power that they have to be able to move the economy to where it's supposed to be. I think we're still having a military type of mentality. The same thing with the Minister of State. Honestly speaking, I think the ministers that we have in Nigeria should take the one by the bull and use the Constitution to deliver for the people, which they are not doing. Every now and then you have to go to the presidency. The president has already given you the power to execute. Use it. Use it. He has already given you the power. But you have to go cap and down, run into the chief of staff or the secretary to the federal government. You're underestimating the power that you have. And you have the National Assembly backing. But because I don't know, I just don't know. Why did you take a job when you cannot deliver? Just resign if you are not allowing you to do your constitutional power to do your job. I don't hear ministers taking action. Everything is being blamed on the president when the president has already given you power to do it. I'm sorry, I'm passionate. I believe in Nigeria, that's why.
Thank you. You've made a valid point, on the two occasions that you spoke to us this morning. Very passionate about it. Out of power is out of means. So when you have power, you use it to, get results. Honourable Minister, your final thoughts. And I wanted to also talk about this issue of a cancellation of the controversial offshore processing arrangement that's now being replaced. Just briefly before we round off.
Kira, let me piggyback on what my colleague just asked you. Along with your closing thoughts, bulletize your response, Honourable Minister. NLNG in Bonny is being celebrated. What's happening to Brass LNG? What's happening to OK?
Okay. First, I would like to take the point raised by my dear brother.
We have 1 minute for you, Honourable Minister.
Well, the issue of PIB. PIB is not a solve-all. It's not a solution for everything, just like it's but it's a foundation. The foundation of a building is not the house. But without the foundation, you cannot have the house. So you need PIB. So PIB cannot be obsolete. Right now, we've deregulated that sector. I mean, the petroleum product sector. It's actually been deregulated. And we're expecting that this is going to bring a lot of investments because it's going to enable a lot of private investment, because now the complaint will not be whether the product can be sold for profit. But of course, you must realize that government will continue to play. That's what the mistake people are making. Government will continue to be the regulator. Because the world over, what people say is that government is equipped to be the regulator and not the operator. So now government wants to take its own role of being regulator. So when you say you have deregulated, that doesn't mean that government can no longer play its role of regulating. I mean, everywhere in the world, I mean, you have the recommended retail price of products, for example. You go to a supermarket in the US, you will have the RRP, which is the recommended retail price. That is a way of government protecting the consumer.
That's right.
So government will continue to play the role of protecting the consumer by regulating so that the marketers will not profiteer, over-profiteer on the masses. That is the actual role that government will continue to play. So when people say, deregulate, we cannot leave it to be a free-for-all.
Market forces.
Yes, so market forces. I mean, I don't know. That means that we don't really understand. You raised the issue of Brass LNG. A few things went wrong with Brass LNG, I must say.
10 more seconds.
A few things, because we lost the window for taking FID during the previous administration, not the Buhari administration. We lost that window for taking FID. So we have to really do a lot to bring the Brass LNG back on stream, which we are trying to do.
Okay,
but of course, that is why this administration ensured that we didn't lose this window with the Train 7.
On that note, we have to really thank you indeed for being part of our program this morning. Right, of course, Nigerians have been educated, properly educated in this area. Honorable Minister of State Petroleum, Timi Persiva, thank you so much for coming. And Chairman House Committee on Petroleum, Musa Saraki Ada. It's been wonderful talking to you this morning. And our friend, Honorable Deacon Sergius Ogun, is also a member of the Committee on Upstream, Downstream. Well, I hope you have understood the Minister after his explanations. Thank you indeed for coming.
Part 2. We have to do part 2.
We have part 2.
And we also had Professor Wumi Ledare, of course, Professor of Petroleum Economics. Thank you very much for being with us. So, gentlemen, that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. As we said, we didn't have time to interrogate the new cars for the members of the House. Those cars came before Corona, so they were not distributed. Whether they have been distributed now during Corona, we have no idea. See you again tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley.
And I'm Kirian. Have a great day.